Welcome to the Coach Barnabas podcast. It's time to take a few minutes and leave behind the stuff that drains us and recharge our batteries with some encouragement and insight. Finding the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Hi, and welcome back to episode 10 of the Coach Barnabas podcast. Great to have you. And, it's been an exciting time. It's been a couple months now, and we're now into double digits. It takes two hands to signify the number of episodes. Woo! But no, it really is. It means a lot. And it's pretty cool to see the number of folks who are listening, watching the videos on the YouTube, even getting some subscribers. It means a lot to me. So I greatly appreciate it. You're encouraging me, and the whole point of this is to be an encouragement to you. So wherever you are, as you're listening or watching this, I hope it finds you in a good place in your life. But if you're going through a difficult patch, I hope something that is shared in these episodes will prove to be encouraging to you, if nothing else, to just let you know you're normal and your thoughts and that what you're going through is just normal part of life. And you may feel like you're isolated, alone, and nobody understands you, but I hope there's a little sense of you can relate, and hopefully these are relatable to you. And if not now, maybe somewhere down the road, you'll go back and say, wow, that really did connect with me, and that was really helpful when I faced these certain things. So that's certainly what I hope, in that you will take away from these things something of value, and that will mean a lot to you going forward. I kind of want to piggyback off of last week's episode. So if you've not listened or watched that one, listened to or watched last week's, or the previous episode 9, I encourage you to, stop here and go back and visit episode 9. And that'll kind of give you a little bit of a platform that leads into this one. So last week, I keep saying last week, it was actually last week when I recorded the last episode. But maybe you're watching them back to back, and when I refer to last week, it was like 3 minutes ago. But if you catch me saying last week, just bear with me. But in episode 9, the last episode, I talked about a leap of faith, and that was transitioning from a town I lived in for a number of years that I loved. I had great relationships. I had a great situation in my life. But at the same time, I'd kind of hit a wall with my personal satisfaction, my personal growth. And I was kind of presented an option, and I wasn't necessarily seeking one. In fact, I definitely wasn't seeking one, but an opportunity came up, and it got me to thinking, and I prayed about it, thought about it for some time, and then really felt like it was what I needed to do in my own personal life, was to take a leap of faith and do something different outside of what had become tried and true and predictable. And again, not necessarily bad things at all, but I just wanted something more in my life. And then, so I go into those details in episode 9, and I mentioned towards the end of episode 9 that was kind of what I didn't know at the time was a prequel to an even larger leap of faith. And that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. But to kind of set it up, I'm going to share a story that actually goes back, way back, get in the old Wayback Machine. It goes back to when I was about 12 years old. I was in 8th grade. So was that 12, 13 years old? And I was in student council, and I think there might have been a dance or some sort of event going on the evening of this particular day. And my Spanish teacher, who was also the mother of a very good friend of mine, she was kind of the student council director. Okay. So I had a great relationship with her and her family. And so we were going to be going out this particular afternoon after school, and we were going to be picking up decorations and things we needed for the dance or event that was going on that evening. So to kind of set the stage here a little bit, something that should be known is that my teacher had one leg, and she was on crutches. And our school was also on a steep incline. So her class was 3/4 of the way up the top, the peak of this incline. But she says, just meet me at the car. Here's my keys. Meet me at the car. And I have to go down to the office and I'll come back when I'm ready. Okay. So she gives me the keys to the car. I'm sitting in the car and the office was down this steep hill, so it was a steep decline to get to the office. And I thought, you know what? Why make her kind of have to, navigate going back up the hill to just get to the car? What I can do is I could just drive the car around to the front of the school, pick her up at the flat space, which is just out, maybe a couple 100 feet from the office. So I really thought I was doing a good thing, and forgetting the fact that I was 12 or 13 years old, unlicensed. It's my teacher's car. It's after school, and to pick her up at the front of the school is, the front of the school. Kind of hard to be inconspicuous in such a situation. As school buses were coming by, kids were waiting for their parents to pick them up. Everybody in the school is just pretty much congregating at the front of the school, and there's a big circular driveway. But I thought nothing of any of that. My intentions were good. I thought, why make her do all that? So I get in the car, drive around. I've never driven a car in my life. I've never driven anything in my life, with the exception of, those little cars at like Disneyland, or Disney World, or maybe a bumper car. I can't remember if I'd ever done that even, but suffice it to say that no, I've never driven a real car with brakes and real steering and without being on a rail of some kind. So, but I get in the car and I pull out. So I was able to put it, thankfully it was an automatic. So putting in reverse was easy. I didn't use a clutch, obviously. So put it in reverse and drove off and, drove out. This is a teacher's parking lot. So not only am I doing all this in front of the school, but I'm in the teacher's parking lot where any teacher could have come out at any moment and seen me, Mr. 12 or 13-year-old, behind the wheel of this teacher's car and taking off. So I pull out the teacher's parking lot, turn left, and go to the far side of the circular driveway, which is the entrance to get to the front of the school. And again, I've never had to step on brakes in my life, so I don't know how heavy to step on the brakes or how light. I don't really even know how fast I'm going. I'm just, just nuts. And finally, I do come to a stop after almost rear-ending a school bus full of my classmates. I don't know how close I was, but close enough to where it got me thinking, oh my gosh, if I rear-end this car, I'm dead. Or rear-end this bus, I'm dead. But I was able to avoid catastrophe of all kinds, and I was able to stop the car, put it in park, and heartbeat back, getting back to normal at this point. And then again, I hadn't really thought this through, as you might have figured for yourself by now. So now it's like, okay, now I've got to tell her that her car's not up there in the teacher parking lot; it's in the front of the school, and I've got to do this in such a way as to not put any of us in a pretty bad situation. But she's in the office. So how do you communicate to your teacher in the office in front of like the principal, vice principal, and secretaries and whoever else happens to be in there at this time of day, that her car's in front and so am I. And, we're here to pick you up, make it easy for you. So, I toddle into the office at this point and feeling a little bit like the conquering hero, because I did all this and didn't kill anybody, including myself. I didn't damage her car or any school buses. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I walk in there and call her over and say, just so you know, the car's around front. And, maybe she thought one of the other teachers pulled it around. She was like, oh, okay, whatever. Just wait out there for me. So that's exactly what I did. Got in the passenger seat this time and waited for her to come. So finally she does. She toddles on over on her crutches and gets in the car. And she's like, what happened? So I told her what I did. And she was horrified first. And just like, you did all this in my car in front of the school at 3:00 or whatever time it was, which is peak busyness, with everything happening in every different direction all at the same time. And so she was kind of mortified, but at the same time, she was like, but thank you. So she actually was appreciative, but said, please don't ever do that again, which I agreed and never did. But I thought this was kind of a funny story in that it does show that maybe the difference between good intentions and wisdom can be very far apart, very vast distance between them. And so this was one of those cases. And but while I can be pretty impulsive, or it used to be pretty impulsive, I think in the years since then, I have obtained a certain measure of wisdom that I certainly lacked in that particular scenario. So kind of a funny story that leads me into now. I've been in Sacramento for about 5 years, the Sacramento area. And again, in episode 9, I do detail some of the things that happened after my immediate transition from San Jose, where I loved, into the Sacramento area, the things that happened just even in my first few months there was a lot, was even kind of traumatic and difficult. But I survived it, and I was in the Sacramento area for about 5 years. I did mention that I got laid off of 3 jobs within my first 6 months of being there, after the third of which I was laid off. A friend of mine approached me and suggested an opportunity where I could start a business. And so, maybe that's something for another time. I won't go into that detail. But I did. I ended up starting a little business, a sole proprietorship kind of thing, just myself, and made a go of it, and very grassroots. And I did that for about 3 or 4 years. And then, so I started this in 2009, and by 2013, I've kind of got a nice little business going, and I've got a very loyal and growing clientele. So it was, I was really enjoying it, and it was something I never thought I could do. So it was very empowering in a lot of ways. And after being laid off of 3 jobs in 6 months in more of a corporate environment, I was really happy to have a layoff-proof job, and it was completely up to me to make it successful or to fail. I wasn't going to get laid off. Nobody was going to come to me and say, hey, you have no job anymore. It was really up to me to make it happen and to have a steady clientele and everything else. So I was able to do all that. And then August of 2013 comes along, and I detail this in yet a different episode of how the origins of how I met my wife. And to just summarize it very quickly, but if you want to revisit that in more detail, you can go back and watch or listen to one of the earlier episodes. But I met my wife online. She lived in Rhode Island, and as I mentioned, I'm from Northern California. So we met online in August of 2013, and that was pretty exciting and all this stuff. By October of 2013, about 2 months have gone by. That's when I made my first visit to Rhode Island. I'd never been there. I couldn't point it out on a map. And you know what? If you're not from Rhode Island or from the eastern part of the United States, and even some who are from the East Coast have a hard time finding it, because on any map, it is so small that usually they have to put the words Rhode Island out in the middle of the Atlantic with an arrow pointing to this little spot to signify where Rhode Island is found. A lot of people think Rhode Island is part of New York, and it's not. But anyway, another story. But so I come out to Rhode Island for the first time, and we have just an amazing time. And between October, it was Columbus Day weekend, between October and the end of the year, the holidays, I'd been out here 3 or 4 times for maybe a week each time. Again, one of the perks of being self-employed. So, everything was working out pretty well. And then I really felt like the only way this relationship is going to gain any traction and get out of this kind of Hallmark movie fantasy type of realm is for me to be in Rhode Island, to live there. And so now we're into 2014, and I'm praying about it and saying, God, this is something that I want to see happen. We'd already determined that there was no way she could move from Rhode Island. Her family and everything was here, and I was less encumbered. My mom had passed away. My dad was pretty independent, And though I visited him a lot, he knew my situation, knew what I was doing, knew what I was going through, knew where my heart was, and he gave me his blessing, and encouraged me to follow my heart. So that's kind of what I did. But still, it wasn't just like I could just pick up and move. There needed to be some bridge between, from a responsibility standpoint, from a financial standpoint, from a professional standpoint. There had to be some bridge that I could justify just picking up and ending my business and then starting all over again 3,000 miles away. And as it turned out, my number one client was opening an office in downtown Boston. And if you know geography at all, Boston's about an hour or so away from Rhode Island, from northern Rhode Island, where my then girlfriend, currently my wife, lived. So there was my justification. And I felt like an answer to prayer. And so I reached out to their office, which was located in St. Louis, Missouri, and said, hey, I understand you're opening an office in Boston. How would you feel about me extending my service to your new Boston office? And because so did that, made arrangements. They said, yes, that would be awesome. That would be great. And so I was their vendor in the Sacramento office. They have offices all over the country. They're going to be opening the Boston one. They thought that would be awesome. So I was like, great. So that was the impetus behind it. And I told her name's Sarah. I'll just call her Sarah from now on because she was my girlfriend. It's weird to call her that now. So I told Sarah, hey, this is the plan. And she was like, okay, wow, that happened fast. You have to remember, this is just after the first of the year of 2014. We talked online for the first time in August of 2013. It's been a matter of like 4 months, thereabouts. I first saw her face to face in October of 2013, so it's even less time now. We're talking about 3 months of actually having a three-dimensional connection. And so things are moving really rapidly. And looking back on it, it's astonishing, and it defies all logic to move at that kind of pace and to uproot your entire life and go and just, and literally it came down to the point to where I was putting everything I possibly could into my car, everything that I would need into my car that I could fit, and heading east. And what I couldn't fit in my car, I put in storage, and that was it. It was now March, and it's March. Today is March 13th. So it was like, I think March 2nd of 2014 is when I began my 3,000-mile journey. Leaving Sacramento, I spent the last night of my time in California at my dad's house, and woke up early in the morning, gave him a big hug, and told him I loved him, and I was on my way. And it took me 3 days to get from there to Rhode Island. And once I got here, it was exciting for me, but at the same time, what this did is it put Sarah in kind of a predicament, because while she was excited and we had a wonderful relationship, it was very loving, at the same time, now it became very real. And it was a long there were no promises, no guarantees. Just nothing was set in stone. It was just like, this is the only way. It's kind of like building a boat in a garage. You don't know where the leaks are until you put it in the water. And that was kind of, it's like, well, here we are. We've got this thing, kind of built, and let's find out if it works or not. And so that's what it really was. No promises, no guarantees. And I was here. And so things became very real. It put a lot of pressure on her in retrospect. And she was trying to be happy and excited, but at the same time, there was some trepidation. Like, she had to kind of face a new reality. Some guy that she just met a handful of months ago has now uprooted his entire life and is now living in essentially your neighborhood, in being surrounded by your world, your friends, and your everything, because she lived in the same town her entire life, except for the few years she went to college. 4 years. She went to college 4 years. So with the exception of those 4 years where she lived on campus, this town has been her home for her entire life. And so it was, it was very challenging for her, but long story short, and again, more details maybe in future episodes. In 2016, in October, exactly, really, minus a couple of days, it was exactly what 3 years from 3 years and a couple of months from the initial hello online. It was almost exactly 3 years to the day from the first time I saw her in person, and we were exchanging our vows that we got married. But the road to get from me pulling up in the driveway, like I'm here, to even the wedding day, man, there was some. It was a difficult road, and that's a story for another time. But the point of all that, and starting off with this silly story about me and making a decision with best intentions and everything, is sometimes we can be really impulsive. And I promise you, and I hope you understand in sharing this story with you of my arrival in Rhode Island and everything that happened, is as impulsive as it sounds. A lot of prayer and a lot of time and a lot of consideration, a lot of conversation happened leading up to that. And ultimately, it's something that we really felt mutually that God was okay with. What we didn't know, and what I didn't know at the time, obviously, was how bumpy the road would be from the point I pulled up in the driveway in Rhode Island to our wedding day, how difficult it would be all the way around, how bumpy the road would be, how challenging it would be, how uncertain it would be. But again, going back to the previous episode, in just knowing that this was going to be something that was going to challenge me, but make me stronger, make me more mature in a lot of ways. And it was literally like the training ground for what I ended up doing in 2014 in taking this leap of faith. Because honestly, there was no turning back. When I moved to Sacramento, it was just a 2-hour drive, and I had everything I needed to be able to go back and live where I lived before. I had all the same associations. I probably could have got my whole job back and everything. I could have done that, fairly easily. When I moved to Rhode Island, I cut all ties. Professionally, I'd basically given my business to somebody else, and just a lot of things. And there was really no turning back. And even when we went through a period where she essentially had to break up with me because she had to deal with some things in her own life before she was really going to be able to move forward. Nothing scandalous or anything like that, but just some things where it's like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to make sure I'm ready. And she needed some isolation time to really be able to do that. And me coming over every night and visiting or going on dates and stuff like that, as fun as that is, wasn't giving her the space and time she needed to process these things. So we went, I don't even know, a few months at least, where we hardly talked at all. Sometimes it was days or even weeks between conversations, being able to talk to her on the phone. And it was hard. I mean, you can hopefully imagine how difficult this was, being 3,000 miles from home in my support system. In the longest relationship I had where I'm living now was a couple of months. And it's with the person that I can't talk to right now. I can't open myself up to and tell her how I'm feeling because she needs to process things on her own. So I am the guy in Castaway. I am on an island by myself talking to a volleyball as my best friend. It was very difficult, but I did have I had a pastor who was just absolutely invaluable to me during this time and talked me off the ledge a few times, just, emotionally more than anything, and spiritually. But again, more details another time. But all that, I guess, to say is, life is going to be very challenging. And sometimes you have to take enormous and scary leaps of faith to pursue your dreams, and to experience just a level of maturity and growth in your life. And sometimes you have to cut away from the things and relationships and people who you've grown comfortable with, you've grown very satisfied with and everything else. And it doesn't mean those things are bad. Maybe they can be. Maybe we get comfortable with and around the wrong people and things, and we need to cut our ties. I don't know. I didn't cut my ties with my friends. I didn't need to, but I'm now 3,000 miles away from them. I can't just pull up to their house and like hang out, or let's go to a movie, or let's go to dinner. Can't do that anymore. But I've had zero regrets, because in due time, what I prayed for happened. And then it's even gone beyond what I hoped and prayed for. So take that as it will. I'm going long, and I didn't mean to, but I hope and pray that my story, whether the silly one or this one, which is very serious, very deep, gives you a sense of perspective. And maybe, you're not facing a thing where you're going to change your life that radically, but maybe it's something that feels radical. Maybe it's something that just feels very challenging, that you may have to give up in order to grow in your life and take a step forward that will lead to another step forward, and maybe lead to 5 steps forward. But in order to do that, you've got to let go of the anchor. You've got to cut that anchor loose that is holding you back. And so that's my challenge to you, is to really think about that. Maybe you're there. If you are, or you've been there, I'd love to hear your story. Feel free to leave comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you have questions, feel free. But I'd love to basically, have a conversation and hear your comments and feedback, and be able to engage with you as well. So thank you for joining me again for episode 10 of Coach Barnabas. I just ask that you be encouraged and be an encouragement. We'll catch you next time. Take care.
Thank you for joining the Coach Barnabas podcast. We'd greatly appreciate your support by liking and subscribing to the podcast, and setting up notifications so we can let you know when new episodes are available. We'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment. Make a difference today.